My name is Vanessa Parks, and I'm with the University of Mississippi's Lead in Drinking Water team. Today, I'm going to run through an orientation for the SIP-SAFE program um, regarding testing for lead in drinking water at childcare facilities. So the team is made up of four of us. There's Stephanie Otts, who's the director of the National Sea Grant Law Center, Chris Zerbeck, who's a professor of engineering, Taylor Harris, who is an AmeriCorps Vista volunteer, and myself, I'm a sociologist at the Center for Population Studies. So to give you some background about the team, they were formed to raise awareness of the risks associated with lead in drinking water. And so the team collects water samples, provides educational materials related to lead in drinking water. And currently, the Lead Project is partnering with the Mississippi State's SIP-SAFE program to assist child care facilities in conducting water testing to check for lead, as well as disseminating educational materials and providing some low-cost mitigation strategies. So a little bit of background about the SIP-SAFE program. The goals are to test water for lead and to prevent any further lead exposure. The SIP-SAFE program also provides training to educate the community on practices to reduce lead in drinking water and to help communicate clearly with parents and staff members about the dangers of lead and how to protect children from further exposure. And we're not just interested in children, we're also interested in protecting the health and well-being of staff as well. There's a link on this slide if you'd like to hear more about the program. So you might be wondering why we're concerned about lead in drinking water. You might have heard about the Flint water crisis. It's not just an urban problem. There can be lead in water no matter where you live. It just depends on the water and depends on your pipes. So lead exposure is a really dangerous neurotoxin, particularly for children. It can damage the brain and the nervous system. It can slow growth and development in children, which can lead to learning and behavior problems and hearing and speech problems. In this graph on the right, you'll see a line, and on the x-axis, the axis that moves across, that's the blood lead level, so the amount of lead that's in a child's blood. And then the y-axis, the up and down axis, is a decrease in IQ points. So what you see is as the blood lead level increases in children, you see a really sharp decrease. It doesn't take very much lead that's associated with a decrease in IQ. So that's why we're so especially concerned about it. And not just IQ, but also some of these other issues related to physical health and performance in school and behavior.
Hi, I'm Chris, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about water pipes and concentrations of lead and some of the steps to get your facility sampled for lead in drinking water. So let's start by looking at how water gets to your faucet, because it's important to understand that a little bit to understand how lead might have gotten in your water if that happens. On the left, we see a house that has a private well for drinking water, and on the right we see a public municipal system. And so those are generally the two types of ways that people get water into their homes and buildings. So in the case of the private well on the left side of your slide, you see that there is a well that is drilled and dug into the groundwater aquifer. So that's the body of water underground that can supply our drinking water. Well, that groundwater aquifer is not the source of lead. That water in the aquifer is completely clear of lead. The lead comes from the pipes from the well all the way to the plumbing inside the house. And so if there are lead materials that are part of those pipes, then when the water passes through, it collects the lead from those materials. So that's how the lead originates. That's the same case for public municipal system. So if you look at the picture on the right and follow the arrows in the pipe there, we have water originating also from a well, but that water goes through a public treatment system. So you can see those tanks there that have different processes going on to treat the water. And then finally, the water is distributed to homes and buildings, like where you see the faucet, the dripping faucet there on the bottom. Well, the water itself is clear of lead through most of that process until it gets to the distribution pipes and the plumbing inside the homes. So again, the source of lead is not the source of the water, but really the piping materials that deliver lead to us. So let's take a look here at what we mean by a lead concentration. We look at lead in water as a concentration called a part per billion, or a ppb in short. So a ppb means, for example, 1 milligram of lead out of 1 billion milligrams of water. So if we have lead at a level of 10 ppb, that would be the equivalent of about 10 drops of lead in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So as you can see, these are tiny amounts of lead. And the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, prescribes an action level of 15 parts per billion, or 15 ppb, as a level at which definitely something needs to be done to that water to remove the lead. Although we know that any amount of lead, even just 1 ppb, can be harmful to children. So what does this mean to you watching this video about getting your water tested? Well, there are 3 steps to go through to get your water tested for lead through our team. Step 1 is what I'll talk about here. First, you attend this orientation meeting or watch this video and make sure that our team has a person designated for us to communicate with. Then the next thing to do is to create a facility layout, and I'll show you a picture of that next. And then after that, basically schedule a time for us to collect the samples. So that's step 2, get your samples collected. Either we come to your facility and do it, or you can do it yourself, especially now during the time of COVID, if you want to restrict people coming to your facility, although our team will always practice the recommended social distancing protocols. Step 3, then you would receive the results from your lead samples, from your water samples, find out if there's lead in the water, and then we discuss what to do next. So let's take a look at step 1 in a little bit more detail. This is the facility layout that I was talking about earlier. Many facilities already have an architectural drawing such as this one. What we would like to do is receive from you that facility plan with all the rooms labeled with a name. If you do not have one of these, that's okay. You can just hand draw it. But in this case, if we take a look, every room is labeled, and there are some X's in many of the rooms and also in the hallways, and those are the locations of faucets and drinking water fountains. Let's take a look next at a picture where the facility hand drew their facility plan. So here's a case where it was all hand drawn, and that is perfectly good for us. We just need to know the names of each location of each room, and we need X's in the locations where there are faucets. One thing we also look for, and I'll draw attention to you in this picture, is if you look at the lower left, there's a little blue box there that says water meter. So if you do know where the location of your water meter is, that is good for us to know, because we also want to know which locations in the building are closest to the water meter. So essentially what we're looking for is that you label the rooms in the building or in the buildings and put X's where the water faucets are. In this next picture here in the next slide has another example where the X's are drawn out there. And then the next slide here is going to give us a picture of the water meter that I was talking about earlier. If you don't know what a water meter box looks like, this is it here. It's basically a metal plate that is going to be on the ground, usually between the building and the street. This is the water meter box. The water meter itself is inside the box. We don't need to see the water meter itself. We just need to know where the box is. So the next step here is going to be described by Taylor. She'll go into steps 2 and 3 of the process.
Okay, so as Chris mentioned earlier, there are two ways you can get your water sampled. The first way is that a UM-led team member comes to your facility to take the samples. The only thing that we would need from you on that day is to have someone at the facility at a pre-designated time and date to open it and accompany our team member as they walk through and take the samples. And the second way would be we ship you the sampling kit and you take the samples yourself. Sample kits include sample bottles, pre-written labels based on your facility map, the sampling form, and the sampling procedures form. The sampling form is for you to take notes, and we'll see an example of that in the next slide. And sampling procedures is the way that we want to take the sample most accurately. So it'll be a step-by-step of how to take the samples to ensure that we get a good idea of whether or not lead is present in the water fixture. With this way, everything comes to you. You keep your box to mail the samples back to us. We send them to the lab, and that leads us to step 3, which is mitigation measures. Before sampling, we want to remember that we only want to sample on days where children were present the day before. So if you're operating under regular business days, Monday through Friday, that means we only want to sample between Tuesday and Saturday. We also only want to sample when the water has been stagnant for at least 8 hours. So when a team member comes to your facility, typically they're going to arrive early in the morning before the first child gets there. We want to make sure that we're only taking samples in faucets that have not been run for the day. That's what stagnant means. So water that has been in your pipes for at least 8 hours. If you're sampling yourself and there's more than one water fixture in a room, like say a bathroom for the students that might have 3 sinks, we want to sample all of the water fixtures in that area. And if you run out of time before the students get there to take your samples, or someone has needed to use the faucet for any reason, feel free to wait until the following morning to ensure sample accuracy. These are sampling directions. They come with the sampling procedures form if you're taking the samples yourself. But if a UM team member is coming to sample the facility for you, then we'll handle this part. This is an example of our sample collection notes. There's a place for you to write the sample location, which would be the room number on your facility map, the time collected, the sample number, and any notes. So if there's any color or odor to the water, or if you have a filter, an aerator, or a screen on your faucet already. In the case of any filters, aerators, or screens, you do not need to remove them to take the sample yourself. We also will not if we're coming to do the samples, but we would like for you to note that they're there. And then step 3, which is to receive and discuss results. So Results might include how many or if any water fountains are above the action level of 15 parts per billion that Chris mentioned earlier. If there are any water fixtures that test for lead, then we'll talk to you about what you can do to restrict access to those faucets, or to flush the faucets to make sure that nobody's exposed to lead, or whether or not a filter might be a good option for you. So these are just examples of mitigation measures. Again, restricting the access to the faucets, flushing them for a predetermined amount of time before anyone uses them for the day, or a filter to make sure that we're making sure that people are exposed to as little lead as possible. So once you have prepared your facility layout and all of the rooms and faucets are labeled, you can send it to leadandwater@olemiss.edu, and we will follow up with your next steps. If you have any questions, our phone number is also listed on this slide. And we want to thank you for participating in the SIP Safe orientation, and we hope to receive your facility map soon.